We have a course here at IMC called Introduction to Mindfulness Meditation. And a few times we've had a course, Intermediate Mindfulness Meditation. What we haven't done yet is the Advanced Mindfulness Meditation. But there is, there could be, beginning and intermediate and advanced practice of mindfulness. There could be a slow practice of mindfulness, the intermediate speed. There could also be the fast progress in mindfulness. There could be beginning level training in Buddhist ethics. There could be intermediate level training in Buddhist ethics. And there could be advanced training in Buddhist ethics. So all these things, and this tradition that we're in is very much has a developmental model for the growth in the Dharma and the practice. So we could talk about these different stages. So, and some people are really eager to learn what's the fast way. I don't want to do the slow way progress, but what's the fast way? So if you're interested in the intermediate level mindfulness, intermediate level, intermediate speed developing in the practice, and intermediate kind of Buddhist ethics, then you would bring your mindfulness to really focus on your speech, how you speak. That speaking is a wonderful window into the depths of who we are. There's a wonderful expression refers to speech that is rooted and rootless speech. So some people, when we talk about people who speak false speech, we talk also about rootless speech. That speech is not rooted in something really good and basic in our human nature. And then there's speech which has deep roots in that deep human nature of ours. And so if there's a wonderful way in which there's a avenue or a connection through our speech to something deep inside. And so much mindfulness can develop. It's a really good way to develop it and grow in it. And some people need to learn the basics of mindfulness first. That's why the introductory level kind of. But if you want to go further, a really great way is start noticing your speech and what happens to you as you speak, and pay attention to your body and what happens in your body as you speak. Are you balanced? Are you tight? Are you tense? There's so much to learn about yourself. Now, if you want to do the advanced course in mindfulness, or if you want to have this whole practice go really fast, like some of you are in a hurry and have other things you want to do, get on to, there's a lot of things to do, So, or if you want the advanced, development in ethics, then what you would focus on is why you say what you say. If you're able to get not only mindful of what you say and how you say it and what goes on kind of emotionally and all these things, but really look at, maybe deeper than just the motivations of what you say. But you can start there. Why do you say what you're going to say? What really is going on? And if you really kind of are honest and take your time to answer that question, because many of us don't just have one reason to speak, but there's multiple reasons. And if you can start teasing apart and seeing all the different motivations going on in our acts of communication, and then deep down, even like deeper than something we would call a reason to speak, like what we're trying to accomplish, but is there kind of like some deeper place that's kind of the source of why we say what we say. And if you really use your ability to be mindful, to stop, take a good look, to be quiet, to really kind of have the kind of strong patience to observe what's happening deeply rather than blurting things out or rushing ahead in speech and interrupting people and all these wonderful things. But really stop and take a, why? Ideally, you'd ask, why am I about to say what I'm going to say? That would be ideal. But that's the advanced. but even to after the fact, why did I say that? What was going on? And take your time and kind of dig and look and see all the different motivations that were happening. I've given people information that I thought they needed to have about something, and then I have asked myself afterwards, why did I say that? And I remember once, this kind of comes to mind right now, coming here to give a talk, like tonight, like this morning. I think it was Monday night. And I ran into someone I knew, an old friend or something like that, just before walking in the door. And so I just wanted to provide some pretty neutral, matter-of-fact information that probably everyone in the world should know, and it's like news. And I said, "Oh, nice to see you," and just had enough time to say a few words coming in. I said, "I haven't prepared for my talk today." So the next thing I did was come in here and sit down, right? So it was still kind of reverberating what I just said. And I said, why did I have to say that? Public service announcement. And I realized that I was kind of protecting myself in case I bombed. I didn't want my friend to think poorly of me, and if I said I wasn't prepared, then I'm safe, I'm not responsible or something. So, it struck me how easy it was for the speech act to come out as a public service announcement. And then, only later did I stop and take a look and see. There's some wonderful little slogans around this kind of speech, and one of them is, to reflect on what you said after you say it is like closing the barn doors after the horses are out. It's a lot easier, difficult to get them back in. Or the words you speak are more like arrows than swords. Because if you draw an arrow, if you draw a sword, you can put it back in its sheath. But if you let an arrow fly, it's not so easy to go after it and get, before it hits someone. So once the words are out of the mouth, it has consequences. And so not only is it valuable to see ourselves deeply, take time and see what's going on here, but it's also very valuable in our connection to other people. And it's really a way of having deeper connections to others, and to learn how to have a deeper insight, or yourself to have a deeper connection to others, even if you don't get to know them better, or if you don't become friends. You don't have to do anything with people. But it's a way, how we speak and how we talk can give us a chance to connect in deep ways, wonderful ways, that is beneficial for ourselves and others. And I think many of us know it can easily be the other way, right? We can say things that afterwards we regret. And if we don't regret them, maybe you should have. I think there's a lot of things I hear. I wish people had some degree of remorse, or some degree of regret, or some second thoughts about what they just said. But in fact, people will go through society spouting all kinds of things. And a lot of it, I think, is connected to conceit. And certainly, I think it's valuable to look at how we speak, and what's the role of issues of conceit, about somehow forming an identity or trying to represent ourselves to other people. Like when I was told my friend, I didn't prepare the talk, I was trying to partly orchestrate or engineer an impression that my friend would have on me. So I was trying to create an impression for who I was, so the person wouldn't see me in some bad way or something. And so how much of our speech is related to conceit and identity, and trying to ensure that people see us in the way we want to see us, or how to defend ourselves so we don't see it be seen some way, or this whole thing about self. So conceit is often a big part of it. So we see it, for example, in people who feel it's very important to do this public service announcements about their opinions. Because people are identified with their opinions so strongly. It's how they assert themselves, and they be someone, and be seen as someone, in some clear way as smart, or someone has the right ideas or something. And that some of the emotions that goes around the spouting of opinions, I think, is often also related to the conceit in a variety of ways. And sometimes when we're meeting with people and with people in direct contact, some people are much more careful with their speech than what we see now on the web, when there's a kind of much more anonymous communication going on, where people are, there's an article and everyone has, so many people, thousands of people might have an opinion, and I'm amazed at how there's more meanness being kind of coming across in these responses and reactions to what goes up there. And I think some of it has to do that no one is, you're kind of not known. It's kind of, sometimes it is anonymous, sometimes it's near anonymous. And so we're doing it alone and without anybody being accountable to anyone. And then sometimes it really clarifies or brings forth what's deeper in the person. Something that sometimes is hidden even from themselves, where we're trying to fit in socially with people and be nice. Ideally, mindfulness would allow us to check in very deeply, understand all these motivations, understand what we're trying to do, and understand what is healthy and what is not. And it begins a lot, I think, by just bringing attention to it, just being curious, being interested. I've sometimes taught day-long retreats here at the IMC on mindfulness of speech, and there was no discussion the whole day on the ethics of speech. No talk about the different guidelines for what is right speech or wrong speech or all that. It was all about just bringing heightened mindfulness to our mouth, to our physical body, to the tone of voice, to our emotions when we speak. And there's a whole kind of canopy of, or whole ecology within us of things that happen when we speak. And to begin understanding that in a deeper and fuller way provides the foundation for ethical speech. In the sense that if we really know ourselves well and have done this inner work and settling, then we have a reference point where it isn't because we should be kind, it isn't because we should avoid being mean or something. We feel, and we sense and feel, we have the information inside of ourselves that it doesn't feel good. It feels like a violence against ourselves when we say a certain things or a certain tone of voice. And you don't have to, it's not an admonition, it's not an it becomes almost not an ethical issue in terms of following a rule. It becomes just a natural thing, just like you put your hand on the stove, and if you're mindful, you will probably, hot stove, you'll take your hand off. If you're not mindful, maybe you'll smell something. and know to do something, but it's that simple, the idea of, if you really know yourself well, tuned into your body, tuned into your emotional life, just tuned into what's going on inside, you'll get the information that's needed to live a wise life that doesn't require rules. So here, I think I'm inspired by this wonderful writing by Mahatma Gandhi. It's a high standard, but sometimes high standards are the ones that maybe hopefully inspire us and become kind of a north star of what's possible. And it's from his autobiography. So he writes, "My hesitancy in speech, which was once an annoyance, is now a pleasure. Its great benefit has been that it has taught me the economy of words. I have naturally formed that habit by restraining my thoughts, and I can now give myself the certificate that a thoughtless word hardly ever escapes my tongue or my pen. I do not recollect ever having to regret anything in my speech or writing. I have been spared many a mishap and a waste of time. Experience has taught me that silence is part of the spiritual discipline of the seeker of truth. Proneness to exaggerate, To suppress or modify the truth, wittingly or unwittingly, is a natural weakness of people, and silence is necessary in order to surmount it. A person of few words will rarely be thoughtless in his or her speech. She or he will measure every word. So, that he would spend probably years refining and being mindful and paying attention to how he speaks, and to be able to come to a point to say something, this is pretty high-level stuff, to be able to have this ability. And I don't know what it was like for him, but I suspect that it became more and more natural for him, as opposed to something oppressive or something that he had to hold himself in and bite his tongue or anything like that. But I suspect he was deeply connected to had deep roots inside after a while, where it became more of a natural thing because he was so attentive to speak in ways that he didn't regret, ever. So to ask the question, why do I say what I'm going to say? Or where inside are these words coming from? So it's one thing to say you're making words, saying something to make a good impression on your friend. That's one part. But where are they coming from, those kinds of words? And perhaps they're coming from a sense of not feeling safe. And so you can kind of bring your mindfulness to that place where we feel insecure or feel tentative or feel vulnerable. And what happens if we bring our mindfulness into that and breathe with it? Is there something to learn? Is there something to heal? Is there something to grow and transform and bring to a different place? Or do we leave those kinds of places that are sometimes deep, so deeply buried we hardly know them or don't know them? If we leave them in the subconscious, they're probably always there influencing what we say and what we do. But part of the function of being this silence and mindfulness is in fact to be able to keep going down. What's here? What's motivating? What makes me tick in this regard? And then, in terms of ethics in Buddhism, if ethics involves our behavior that tries to avoid causing harm to self and others, the Buddha does have guidelines for that. So we can either follow these as guidelines, but as we mature in this practice, these aren't guidelines to follow so much as, so they're not necessarily just prescriptions, but they're descriptions of how someone who's really well in touch and has deep roots inside would want to act in the world and be in the world. So the Buddha gave, in some places, 4 guidelines, criteria for right speech, and in some places he gave 5. So the 5 have the 4, and then he adds 1. So the first is a truthful speech. And the word for truth has been said in its ancient Pali language, and it's satya, has a kind of a double meaning, both being both truth and also real, that which is real, like reality. And so the idea that truth is connected to what's real is, and so you want to kind of connect to something. What is real for you? What's really of great value? What's important? And real is kind of a vague thing, but if you're real in your most authentic way that you could be, what are the words that come out of that? Are your words true in the terms of, logically true, but are they true in being part of being authentic, what's really authentic and valuable for you? There's a wonderful Chinese character. These Chinese characters sometimes tell little stories because they have their pictograms, so they show pictures kind of. And so there's one character that on the right side is the character for a word. And it actually looks like a mouth that's square, and then 4 lines above it that look like like vibrations traveling out of the mouth. And then on the left side is it's what's called a radical. It's a character for a person. And so you see this person standing upright and the words next to them. And the picture for a word next to it. And so some people say that picture, the little story it makes, a person standing by their words. And it's the character for trust or faith in Chinese or Japanese. So faith or trust is standing by your words. And so the idea that you would have words that you would stand by, that words that would stand by you in times of need, truthful words, words that are rooted in what's real. And they say that someone, I think it was some Samuel Johnson, some writer, said something like, even in the society of devils, they rely on truth, because their society would fall apart if people weren't honest with, to some degree. So it's really important for our social harmony, things getting along, truthfulness. The second is it kind? Is what we're going to say, is it kind? And if it's not kind, then we really need to look more deeply. Is it necessary to say it? Why are we saying it? What are we trying to accomplish if we speak words which are not kind, which are unkind, which are mean or harsh? What's the purpose of it? Is it effective? Is it the best way? Is that the society we want to live in? Society where we communicate and convey things through harshness and meanness. As for the Buddha, the right speech involves kind speech. The third is it beneficial? Is it useful, what we're going to say? And that's a wonderful consideration. Because some people feel like they have good things they want to say, they have purposes they want to say something, and they want to accomplish something, but is it going to accomplish it? Is it beneficial? I've known people who have tried for years with a family member to try to have a conversation or try to get something across, and they just keep hitting their head against the wall. It's not going to work. Every time they try, it actually puts a strain on the relationship a little more. It doesn't help. It's not beneficial. It's true. It might even be said kindly. It could feel like this is really important. We have to take care of this. But after years of trying, you can say, well, it hasn't been beneficial. It hasn't been useful. It's actually been counterproductive. So maybe it's not. Maybe there's no point in saying it. So to have a sense, when can what we say have its intended purposes? And if it's not going to work, if it's not useful, then maybe we don't say it. Sometimes people say things only because there's an internal pressure to say it. And so that's where the mindfulness, self-mindfulness is so important, where we know this internal pressure to speak. And then we know how to monitor it and manage it on our own, so we don't blurt out things. And we're not saying things for the other person's sake, we're really saying it for our own sake, because we have to get it off our chest, we have to get the pressure out. And so to be mindful is to kind of maybe not allow the pressure to build up. We see that, probably most of us can see it in some conversations we're in. They're a little bit excited. And we really want to interrupt people. We really get our thing in. And there are times still to this day where I kind of really want to say something to some more excited conversations. Sometimes they're fun conversations with friends and stuff. And in my desire to want to say something, I've stopped listening to them. That's unfortunate. And but what I have to say is important, and more important than them. How could they go on and on with these unimportant things when there's important things to say? I didn't prepare my talk, or something. And so, is it beneficial? So I think that's a very tender concern. Tender, careful to do that, but tender. It's awkward. It's like some things are important to take care of. But is it useful? Does it work? The fourth guideline does it create social concord? Does it create social harmony? And we, to some degree, when we speak to others, they see they see themselves reflected sometimes in how we speak. And some people are paying a lot of attention to the subtle cues and the not so subtle cues about how they're seen and what people say to them, because they want to fit in, they don't fit in, they want to belong, they want to be seen a certain way. And so how we speak to people can have a big impact on them. Also, people want to think good about themselves and want to kind of feel happy. Some people, if you praise them in some way, they suddenly get energized. And if you criticize them, it kind of deflating for people. But how we speak also reflects on ourselves. And even though we can be energized in being angry with someone, and some people like that energy and aliveness and the sense of being right that comes through sometimes, it's not a kind of energy that's very satisfying to have. And so it doesn't reflect well on us and all that. But most important, what is the relationship we're forming with other people? Are we creating a sense of being connected as human beings, or feel closer to each other, feel a sense of, community with the other person? Or are we creating more distance? And I found it very helpful to ask myself in conversations the simple questions: do I now feel closer or further apart from the person? Has the sense of warmth been warmed up, or has the conversation cooled down interrelationally in this person? And just that has sometimes guided me. I go, I could see saying this, I didn't prepare my talk. And then I'd pay attention to how that lands on some person. Realize that, the person just went blank. Very, very subtly. I mean, what is the person going to say? The person doesn't care, and so it doesn't. It's not a communication that is a bridge for some deeper thing to go on. In this situation where I came in through the front door, and I said that as I was going through the door, I didn't prepare a talk. It would have been a different effect if I had said, I'm so happy to see you after all these years. I'm so happy to see you after all these years. But, I had important things to announce and say, right? Because of my conceit, because it's so important, myself and how I'm seen and all that, right? This is maybe a little bit of an aside, but I'm kind of touched by this little story. I don't know if it's true, but it's a little story of a young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, who came home late from school, but really late. And the mother was a little bit worried. And when he came in through the door, the mother said, "Where were you? You're late. You're supposed to come right back to home from school." So a little bit, perturbed, maybe a little bit annoyed. And the boy said, my friend Ricky, on the way back from school, his bicycle broke. So I stayed to help. And the mother just shot out and said, "You don't know anything about fixing bikes." And no, but he was crying, so I stayed with him until he stopped crying. And then the mother relaxed. Maybe even felt remorse. Wow, I didn't know. So, what happens in our conversation? What impact does it have interrelationally? And are we interested in the relationships we form? There's you, there's me, and there's we. And what kind of we do we want to have? What kind of community do we want to form? What kind of connection do we want to have with other people? What don't we want to have? What are we afraid of having? How much does fear operate in our communications with other people? How much are we afraid to be connected close and to create closeness? How much are we pushing people away? How much are we asserting ourselves in ways that actually diminishes things? How much are we interfering? How much are we telling long, long stories? And if you really watch the other people, you can see the energy drain. They were smiling, and you smiling, and they first saw you, and then so you see the smile slowly diminish, and the glint, the wonderful glint in their eyes slowly, kind of, and many years ago, I had a Zen teacher, and there was a time when I was I'd come back from a long retreat, and I was really on fire for this practice, and just excited about it and wanted to tell people. And so I was talking to him, and I was telling him about practice and Vipassana practice and how great it is, and I was on. And after a while, he stopped. He looked at me and said, "Gil, talking to you is like talking to an addict." And that got my attention, and it was very helpful, because what I saw was I was so swept up in these ideas and proselytizing and a zealot for mindfulness that I stopped being mindful, right? And so this idea, so we can get so caught up in our ideas and so enthusiastic or so important to say something, so we lose touch with the other person, which happened there with me. So, is it truthful? Is it kind? Is it beneficial? And does it create concord or harmony or between people? Those are the 4 criteria. And then the 5th one that is sometimes added is the question, is it timely? Is it the right time for it? And that can be difficult sometimes, because some people feel like every time, whenever I want to say it, is the time. Yes, it's time, I want to say it. But is it the right time for it being beneficial? Is it the right time for it being really kind? It might be kindly said, but I want to kindly tell you that your wedding dress is not really nice. Just before the wedding, right? That's not the right time for that kind of public announcement. So is it the right time? Some people are not ready for it. I've known people who have wanted feedback for things that they were doing, but they said, please don't tell me right after I've done it. Like I know some people who give public speeches, and they want feedback on their public speeches, but they're so tender after giving it. I want feedback, but wait. A day, 24 hours or something. That's the right time, then I can hear it. So is it the right time? And is it the right time for you? I've learned that there are times when I'm been angry or annoyed with someone. Generally, that's not a good time for me to have a conversation with someone. Even though the pressure to speak is there. But if I can, if it's possible in a situation to not talk about the difficulty at that moment, I find it much more productive for me to step aside, do my own homework with my anger, find a way to settle it, and look more deeply what's going on, and then go back and have that conversation. I find it's not the right time when I'm angry, because I'm more biased in my speech, I'm more impulsive, I'm not thinking very straight, and I don't have these deep roots inside to what's really important for me and places where I want to come from. So at the risk that your smiles and glint in your eyes disappear, and and I go on and on too much, I'll stop. And if you would like to say something, a question, testimonials around this kind of thing, concerns, whatever seems appropriate at this point. We have a few minutes.
What you said about mindfulness and speech rang very true for me. As you said it, I was thinking that's one of the least mindful moments I can think of, is when I'm speaking. I'm kind of just on autopilot and not really aware of anything going on inside me or even what I'm saying half the time.
I think that it's true for many people, and I would say that for myself as well. All the different areas to be mindful of, it's probably the place that still is probably where I'm weakest of all the different places. It's a hard place. Where's the other mic? Is it up in the stage there?
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, Martha. Martha, the person right in front of you.
Is it working? Okay, great.
Sorry, I'm hard to find. Is that okay?
Right.
I have a question concerning
Yes.
personalities.
Yes.
It's pretty common, especially in business settings, to determine who's the extrovert and who's the introvert. And there's been a bunch of books written about that. I am a corner extrovert, and I really struggle with this.
Right.
And I work in a field of introverts.
Yes. And
Any thoughts of just sheer personality? Is it harder?
I appreciate that question a lot because for a variety of reasons. And generally, people who hang out in Buddhism for a long time tend to be more introverted than extroverted people. I think that kind of works better somehow for them. But there's plenty of extroverts, but it's kind of like we kind of lean that way, I think. And so, but it's a beautiful quality to be an extrovert, but it also takes care and attention how to do it. Some extroverts, I think, how I understand it, only understand themselves by speaking. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of information to be found in speaking. So this idea of waiting to speak, there might be some value in it, to some degree, but maybe you're not going to know what you're going to say, but you wait a moment to really stay grounded. Like there was a time when I would always breathe 3 long deep breaths before I answered a phone. Not to be mindful of what I was going to say, but rather to be connected here. So when I spoke, I was self-aware more. So there might be ways of preparing for that. It also might be that different kinds of speech and understanding yourself through that speech, you have different kinds of conversations with different people. And so there's more contemplative conversations where you really learn about yourself or explore different important topics in your life that you do with particular people who are capable of that and capable of being responsive to it and share in the kind of deep reflection of some really deep topic that introverts would tend to do alone. So Mick.
Gil, I wanted to ask you about what I call private speech. I'm writing an email. I spent an hour on it. I send it. I notice that, my God, I didn't do the final proof, and something's gone out. And I am certainly known to say, damn. Or, in the past, I have said, shit. One of those two things. Nobody's around. And I wonder what your attitude is toward controlling that kind of private speech. Obviously, if you say it in private, there's a more likelihood that you'll say it in public. And I just wondered what your thoughts were.
Yeah. I mean, it's fairly common for people in their own minds, so some people, to be very self-critical. And sometimes it's actually very mean, the way some people will speak to themselves. And something like that is, I don't know if exactly mean, but it is painful to have that kind of response to oneself. I think if the private speech, personal speech, kind of in your own mind or when you're alone like that, comes out in a way that doesn't feel right to you, this is where if you only focus on what you say and try to do better in the future, maybe you only have a limited amount of success. What's more important is to change the conditions inside of you so the conditions shift, that you're less likely to speak that way. So if a person's impatient all the time, they might blurt out all kinds of things. But if they keep trying to, if they do nothing about their constant impatience or their constant annoyance that they have, then the pressure to have that kind of speech is going to keep coming up. But if they go underneath this, they check in with themselves how they are before they spoke, and then they're able to settle themselves or to heal some of these deeper kind of sources inside from which that speech comes from, then it doesn't happen again. So it a little bit involves a character change. So for you, for example, if you have a history with these emails, you might, before you start an email and before you send it, you might take that as an opportunity for a minute to really settle yourself and check in. How are you feeling? Are you feeling impatient? Do you feel comfortable with yourself? Do you like yourself? Are you your best friend? How deeply how are you in this relationship to self? And if that's a little bit off, maybe there's a way of settling that. And then if you send it, the email, and you realize, oh, I didn't say the right thing, then you're already in a kind disposition towards yourself. And then you can say, oh, I'm so sorry, or, oh, that's unfortunate. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does. What I'm talking about is, you're talking about just staying prepared in a calm state all the time. And I guess I don't know exactly how to do that. Because these are not things that come up and I prepare for.
Yes.
There's things, as I say, I work on an email for an hour, and suddenly I realize, my goodness, I send it out without looking at that last sentence.
Yeah, I don't know if we can be in a good state all the time, non-stop, but we can periodically check in with ourselves and find out, where am I at right now? And then if some little correction can be made, then we correct for it. So I don't know how you are, maybe for you it's a nice, easy, pleasant thing to spend an hour with an email. But I've done that, spent an hour on the email recently. And it was kind of a nice process, but it was also, I was certain kind of seriousness in which I was engaged with it, and it was going to be a consequential email, I felt. So after I finished writing it, I actually sat back and put it aside for a little bit, and just breathed and thought about it, and just kind of connected to myself, and then I reread it to make sure that it conveyed what I wanted, to make sure that I was in the right place and all that. So it's not like it's too high a bar to be in a good state all the time, but it's not the high bar to return to a good state often. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
So I don't know who's...
Thank you.
I see a hand way in the back. Maybe we could try there. And
Hi. So this question is regarding the 5 ways of speaking that you said. For some reason, I always give importance to the 4th one. And at times, it is fine. It is important to say something, even though it may not, create good harmony. It's not necessarily lying by holding off that thought, but it may not be the best thing. Sometimes it is important to say something, even though it is not creating the good harmony with that person.
Yes. So a few things about that. I want to say yes to you overall, but there are such times. But it's also possible to learn communication skills, so that you learn to say what you're going to say, so the other person feels supported. So you might say, for example, you've done that a number of times now. I've told you not to do it, and I'm going to have to really make if you do this again, I'm going to have some serious consequences here, and tell you something that you don't want to hear or something. But I don't really want to do that. I really want to support you here. I want to try to find the best. So if it comes to that, then I have to say something really clear. I'm going to try to do it in a way that's supportive of you and supportive of everyone. You're not going to like it, but I'll say it, and then we'll try to find our way. I'm not going to close the door to you. Something. So you're trying to find some way to say something. You don't just say it, boom. But you try to have the skill to say it clearly and definitively if it needs to be done, but in a way the person feels supported or feels like you're willing to listen, or, this is the decision. Do you want to say anything? Do you have any questions? As opposed to saying it and slamming the door. So I think that's possible. But the other thing about it is that we're not always responsible for the harmony, right? It's a two-way thing. So some things have to be said, and it can be said kindly. It can be said with the idea it's going to be beneficial. It has to be said. You say it in the way you hope it's beneficial, and it's not taken away. And the other person slams the door. The other person burns the bridges. That's their job. That's what they did. You can't be responsible for all of it. So it is time to stop. So some of you, I saw your hand up. So I'm happy to stay here if some of you wanted to say something, would like to come up and talk to me. And it's a wonderful way to have to sit and meditate, for example, and learn how to do this personal mindfulness. And then at sooner or later, some point, to really feel that what we discover in here, the goodness we discover, the freedom we discover, that it begins to flow into the society, the world around us. And caring for our speech, paying attention to speech, is one of the primary, very strong channels by which our goodness has a chance to flow out in the world. And then it flows back. So thank you all. And is people setting up out there is it tea today? The tea today. Oh yeah, so it's tea out there. So so you get to practice right away. So everyone's welcome to stay, and they're setting up tables there. In a few minutes there'll be some little refreshments, some tea, and maybe to drink and stuff. And it's a nice time to say hello, and maybe if you'd like, before you go, you might just turn to someone next to you and say hello. Thank you.